everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Alexa. Today we're making cannoli cupcakes. I measured out all my ingredients and I recommend that you do so too. You can find a full list of ingredients and measurements in the link in the description. Remember to watch the video first so you can be prepared. First, I'm going to sift my flour and baking powder. This is to make sure there are no clumps. If you don't have a sifter, you can use a wire whisk or a fork. When you're sifting, you can push the ingredients through using a rubber spatula or a spoon, or you can tap the sides of it with your hands. Now that my ingredients have all fallen through, I'm going to tap the sides of my sifter so I can make sure no ingredients are stuck to its stand. If your sifter doesn't have a stand, you don't need to do this step. Next, I'm going to put my butter and milk into a microwave-safe bowl. I cut the butter into pieces so it'll melt better. I suggest cutting the butter in even smaller than I did so it will melt quicker. However, make sure that the pieces are very similar in size because that will help it melt more evenly. Now just place this bowl off to the side because we're not ready to use it yet. Now I'm going to put my eggs into the bowl of my stand mixer on high. Make sure to use a whisk attachment for your mixer. After about 30 seconds of it mixing by itself, I'm going to add in my sugar while it's still mixing. I'm going to mix this for 7 minutes now. Set a timer for 7 minutes to keep track. As you can see, the mixture is becoming a pale yellow color. When 5 minutes have gone by, take your microwave-safe bowl with the butter and milk and put it into the microwave. Melt it in 30-second intervals until the butter is fully melted, but not any longer. For me, it took 2 minutes. The milk might start to sizzle or bubble, but that's okay if the butter is still solid. It is important that you melt the butter at this point instead of doing it ahead of time. Next, I'm going to add in about a third of my dry ingredients. It doesn't have to be exact. dry ingredients aren't mixing good, so I'm going to delicately scrape down my bowl using a rubber spatula. Don't stir it using the rubber spatula because that will deflate the eggs. Just go around the sides of the bowl using the spatula to move the dry ingredients off of the sides of the bowl. Now add in about half of the remaining dry ingredients. The dry ingredients are still not mixing well, so I'm going to scrape down my bowl again, the same as before. Now I'm going to add in the rest of my dry ingredients. I'm going to mix this until no more dry ingredients are visible. My dry ingredients are sticking to my bowl and my whisk. I'm going to scrape them off of there again. My batter looks great, so let's move on to the next step. Next, I'm going to add in my oil and my vanilla extract into my butter mixture. I'm going to whisk this until it's combined. Now I'm going to add in a few spoonfuls of the batter into this. This is called tempering. It's a way of gradually raising the temperature of the eggs without having them scramble or curdle when we are adding it to a warm butter mixture. It doesn't need to be an exact or very much batter. Just make sure to whisk this really fast so the eggs don't cook. After you do that, put your mixer on medium as you pour in the butter mixture. I'm going to stop my mixer for a second to make sure my batter isn't sticking to the sides or bottom of my bowl. There's some batter sticking to my beater, so I'm going to scrape it off of there. I'm going to continue mixing this for another second until all my batter looks the same. This is supposed to be a very runny batter. My batter looks great, so let's move on to the next step. Now I'm going to measure out my cupcake. I'm using 1/3 of a cup ice cream scoop. Make sure the scoop is entirely full so all the cupcakes will come out the same size. If any batter drips onto the cupcake tin, be sure to wipe it off of there before you put it into the oven because it will be easier to clean off before it's baked on. Next, I'm going to put my cupcakes into the oven. My oven's preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. My cupcakes took 20 minutes to bake. I'd recommend setting a timer for 18 minutes, and then another timer for a few more minutes if they aren't done yet. When they're done, they should be golden brown and bounce back when you gently push on them. Put them on a cooling rack so they can cool. Now I'm going to start on the vanilla frosting. To do this, I'm going to first sift my powdered sugar. This is a very important step because if you don't do this, your frosting will be full of powdered sugar clumps. Next, I'm going to cream my butter. It is important to get the butter to be as soft and creamy as possible without being melted, because this will make the frosting the perfect texture. Therefore, I'm going to mix this for about 5 minutes and scrape down the bowl whenever the butter looks like it's sticking to the side of it. looks great now, so I'm going to add in the powdered sugar. I'm going to mix this until the powdered sugar is as mixed in as possible. It probably does not look very mixed in because of the lack of liquid, but that's normal. Then I'm going to add in milk, a half a tablespoon at a time. It's important to do this very gradually, even if the frosting still looks too thick, because it can quickly go from being too thick to being too thin. It should be able to hold up its shape, but still be spreadable. I used 3.5 tablespoons of milk to get to this consistency, but it'll likely take a different amount for each person each time, depending on the climate inside the house and how soft your butter was. to now start on the cannoli filling. First, I'm going to sift my powdered sugar. Now, I'm going to add in my ricotta to the powdered sugar. I'm going to stir this with my spoon to mix it in. Now that it's all mixed in, I'm going to add in my mini chocolate chips. I'm going to mix this until it's evenly mixed in. Next, I'm going to put the frosting into my piping bag. To do this, I put the piping bag into a jar and I'm using a rubber spatula to push the frosting into the bag. After I do that, I'm going to push the frosting down into the point of the bag using my hands. Then I'm going to cut about a half an inch off the point of the bag. I'm going to twirl the top of the bag and make it airtight, putting pressure on the frosting to press it down so we'll be able to make an even swirl. Now I'm going to use a grapefruit spoon to cut the center out of the cupcake. You can use a regular teaspoon also. Then I'm going to fill it with the filling. I'm going to put the part that I removed from the cupcake back on top just to have a little more cake for texture when eating it before I frost it. There are different ways you can frost these cupcakes. The first way I'm showing you is using my piping bag to swirl the frosting on the top of the cupcake. Make sure you put even pressure onto the piping bag as you're piping so an even amount comes out. You can also use a knife or offset cake spatula to swirl the frosting onto the top. You may want to add a little more milk if using this method to make your frosting because it'll make it smoother to spread. You can see mine wasn't as smooth as I think it should be for this because I used the same batch of frosting that I was going to pipe with. Also, I don't put the extra cake that I removed back in when I do this because it'll make it harder to frost. Now that I've frosted the cupcakes, I'm going to press a few mini chocolate chips into the frosting. It's important to press them in because otherwise they'll fall off the cupcake. And my cannoli cupcakes are done and looking delicious. Please let me know what you thought of the video in the comments and how the recipe went for you. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you can see when new videos are added. Thank you and enjoy!